So, welcome to results. Two types of approaches to getting results. One approach is through looking at our identity, and the second approach is probably an old traditional approach, is to do with goal setting. So, let me ask you a question firstly. Do you often feel like you experience a loss of direction? Do you feel at times that you're never really achieving in the way that you want to achieve? You certainly don't feel it anyway. Well, really, in this video, what we're going to be exploring is a step-by-step process in which we focus on achieving results more through what we call an identity or a systems approach versus, as I said earlier, that old goal-setting type of approach. And I think, in essence, the reasons why I bring this up, when I look at some of the prior workshops that are run throughout this year and run throughout all the years, I'm quite daunted about the current statistics, especially within Australia. We look at some of the statistics here, around 1 in 5 Australians suffering from mental illness. A third of our young women and a quarter of our young men are experiencing some level of mental disease or disorder. We are roughly taking off around 9 million days per annum off due to mental stress. Currently, even with all the information that's out there, Australians are currently sitting, around about 63 to 65% of us are currently overweight or obese. In some age brackets, especially ages between 18 and 24, that sits at 80%. That is 80% of our population overweight. Over the 20 years of me being a performance coach, where we look at ways of raising the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of individuals and teams, and most importantly, assisting people to being their very best version of themselves, we find that there's maybe 10 to 12% of individuals, are achieving the very basic physical activity guidelines of adult Australians. And why is this? Well, I truly believe that, in essence, the reason why this is happening is people don't have the belief systems, inherently the identity, to back up the types of success, the types of results, types of achievement that they want to achieve. So I hope this video here, or this workshop here, helps us answer that identity question. So, when it comes to identity, as you can see here, when it comes to results, I should say, and achieving results, as you can see here, really, what we need to consider first is that you may have been part of one of my Setting the Compass sessions. So Setting the Compass sessions is the session that I run both individually and within workplaces. And they designed the Compass session designed to preview time past, maybe 12 months prior or the year prior. And two, the second part of that process there is looking at previewing time coming forward, or the future year. So it really allows us to take stock. The second part of what we have done, if you've already done some prior work, as you can see here by this image, is around the wild, wacky, goal-setting, brainstorming process. Now, this is all well and good. We're going to come back and utilize this, but this was only just the beginning. So if you've done the wild, wacky brainstorming process, hence I've got a couple more videos on that. So be sure to check out my channel around those two particular posts. One around the setting the compass session, and also a workshop, and also the wild, wacky brainstorming process. If you've done that, we're going to park it. I'm going to come back and revisit it. So please rest your mind that it is extremely valuable still. So I thought I'd quickly touch on the neurotransmitters of the brain. And in essence, there's a reason why I talk about this. Specifically, neurotransmitters such as oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, all these neurotransmitters that either make us feel really good, bring a certain level of pleasure into our life. You can see all these different benefits. There is a huge impact that certain things that we do, especially when it comes to identity, that allows us to make the most of these neurotransmitters. So my argument, with neurotransmitters in mind, knowing that we want to make the most of those happy chemicals inside our brain, my argument is this. That true long-term thinking should be and is goalless thinking when it comes to forming habits and achieving success. So if I was to start to look at ways of separating, the identity approach versus the goal-oriented approach, here's where it starts. So when we look at identity, it's more of a systems-first approach. So it's how we go about setting up the system in your internal and external environment. If we focus on obviously the goal-oriented approach, it's literally focused on the goal first. When we look at the identity and systems approach, it's more about the process. And if we look at the goal setting approach, it's more about the product. And what happens with the product? Product is something that we consume. We consume it, we have it, and then we get rid of it. Okay. I've said here the identity or systems approach is more what we talk about or we refer to is continuing playing the long game versus we look at goals. It's more about the short game. Okay, it's very short. You'll see another slide shortly. The problem with goals here is what I think the real essence of the problem with goals are, and this links back to the short game as I just mentioned. It's momentary change. So when we set a goal, okay, it's just a momentary change in time. All right. So, and that does a couple of other things. It's at odds with long-term progress. So what happens? So we achieve something. How many times have you achieved something, whether it's running when you've trained for a half marathon, for a marathon, or you've gone on a weight loss target or goal? What has happened after achieving those goals? Okay, often we revert back to our old preconditioned thinking. Okay, so goals don't necessarily line up with long-term progress and sustainable change at a habitual level. Okay, and it delays. I believe that the problem with some goal setting, okay, depending on your approach, goal setting delays happiness, and that links back to those happy hormones, those happy chemicals that I mentioned in that prior slide. So basically, we're putting off happiness until we achieve a goal, till we achieve that momentary point of change. Okay, and this is where I believe goals can be problematic. So Dean's issues here. Okay, so when we look at the process for change and getting results, there are three options. We can either focus, we've got an identity approach, we've got a process approach, or we've got an outcome approach. When we look at the outside ring here, firstly, the outcome approach is basically a focus on what you get. So doing that first. The second part here is the process, which is what you do. The third part of the process is identity, which is what you believe or who you are or what you stand for. Okay. When you look at the current order of things in today's society, unfortunately, this is how it runs, and you see it playing out all the time. And in essence, this is the reasons why some of the statistics that I presented in that first slide are the reasons why they exist. We focus on the outcomes, the process, and if at all, then the identity. We focus on what we get first, the product. Then we focus on how we're going to do it. And the third step is around identity, what you believe and who you are and what you stand for. But to be honest, I only think it's a very small, maybe 1% to 2% of people that actually ever focus on building that level of identity through the process of making a change and achieving results. So it's from the outside in, going from the outside in. So what I propose is that you could, obviously, you don't need to use your imagination here, is that we focus on the inside out. We focus on identity first, process second, and then outcome first. So it's more about the focus is strongly associated with who you are, what you stand for, what you want to be left for, what's that legacy that you want to leave, how do you want to show up. Then we focus on the systems approach, as in the process that we're setting up in regards to the how. Okay, then that's why we still have the goals there. Then it's about, designing outcomes, that are linked to that identity that we want to build, okay, that we're currently building. I hope that makes sense. So you can see there, arrow from the outside or from the inside out. So what will this take? If you look at a identity approach, we need to challenge our belief systems. We need to up-regulate. We need to pretty much stop being our old self, okay? We need to change the view of our world. We need to look at ways of challenging how we see ourselves firstly, okay? It's very much an introspective approach to achieving a result. in regards to the process of behavior change. Okay, we need to move beyond judging ourselves and judging other people. And look, in essence, I'm not saying this is easy. Okay, this is the reasons why I spend a lot of time in the one-to-one and team coaching process, because this takes time. Okay, this all does take time. In essence, the reasons why people succumb to short-term quick fixes because it takes work. Okay, and we don't necessarily get the result straight away. Okay. So the identity impact, if we focus from an identity impact approach, okay, better health. Okay, so what we will do is we will focus on accomplishment over comfort. So what I'll mean by that, okay, or training over relaxing. So if we focus on building our identity, eventually we'll focus on challenging ourselves through new experiences versus sitting on the couch. So when we've got an opportunity to go to the gym, even if it's doomy and gloomy outside, we'll often take that, because that is part of the identity of who we are. Okay, and it progressively gets easier with more evidence that we get to back up that identity. Versus those who don't have the identity will easily go to that comfort. Okay, and they're more often to come up with a range of excuses as to the reasons why they didn't get started or why they didn't train. Okay, same thing with food or anything. And you can see here training over relaxing. So those who are focusing on building identity will train. Okay, versus obviously, as I said, relaxing. Looking for those easy way outs. Okay. However, when we're focusing on identity, it's very important that we take a small, progressive, step-by-step approach, which I'll share with you shortly. Okay. So the identity impact, that we take pride in our identity. So we take the time to build up our identity first, versus, as I said, focusing on the goal and that short term, or that short game, that product approach. Okay. Motivation to maintain habits. So, when we look at identity impact, there is an unwavering, not only motivation, but more so inspiration when we come from that identity perspective, that assists us at an unconscious level to progressively form those new habits. And what we find over time, and it's evidential, it's been evidential through everything that I've studied and researched, you Google on YouTube and all that sort of stuff, is that it progressively becomes unconscious. So these changes in regards to working towards results becomes, it almost becomes your path of least resistance, okay, provided you first decide to work on your identity. Okay. So as I said here, true behavior change is identity change. Okay. It is not goals. It is not necessarily the how. Okay. It really does start with the why. It starts with who you are and how you want to show up. Okay. So now moving into process, from an identity perspective. So it's actually more than two steps. Well, there is two main steps to the process of identity change. Okay, or changing your identity. Okay. So identity stands for, it's really simple, essentitas, being, and identitum is repeatedly. So you don't have to be rocket science to work out, okay, so what does it mean? What does it mean for us to be able to form that new identity, that assists us, okay, in obviously achieving more success more often on internal results? So we need to firstly, so for you who are listening to this or watching this video, we must really, through a process of undeleted brainstorming, start to decide on what type of person you want to be. What type of person do you want to be? What do you want to stand for? These are all questions that will assist you in bringing up that identity, to identify that identity that you really want to work on. Okay, who do you wish to become, and who do you need to be, and what do you want to be known? What do you want to be known for? So these are just the question prompts that can assist you in deciding the type of person you want to be from an identity perspective. I often get a question around, do I need to form different identities for different areas of life? My challenge for you is to think about an identity that will assist you in all areas of your life, both personal, professional, relationships, personal growth, your health and fitness, your career, your finances. Okay, think about an identity that will progressively be able to improve all areas. Okay, however, if there is one particular area that you want to focus on, it's probably going to be easier for you to form that identity in that one particular area. Let's say, for example, you wanted to become an exerciser, and you currently have an identity associated with, maybe you're a non-exerciser, you've never exercised before, you've never had a ritual around exercise. Okay, it's going to be quite easy to decide, okay, well, the identity that I want to have is that I want to be an exerciser, or someone who exercises, okay, an exerciser versus someone who exercises. Might be easier if it's more context related. However, I really encourage you to think about an identity that sort of sits on top, that can potentially encapsulate all areas of life. Okay, so once again, some of these question prompts to assist with identity. What do you want to stand for? Who do you wish to become? Who do you need to be? And what do you want to be known for? Okay. Step 2, as you can see here, is create the system. Really simple. Think about the definition of identity. Prove it to yourself with small wins. So once you decide on your identity, how can you go about proving it to yourself? Okay. What can you repeatedly do? What are some of the things that you can repeatedly do that is building up this identity that may be totally opposite to what you've been in the past? Okay. Now, I've put here, what would X person do? So if you wanted to be an exerciser, well, if you've never been an exerciser, you could think about what an exerciser could do. Or if you knew someone who's an exerciser, maybe find out, ask them, what do they do? How do they set up their days? How do they set up their weeks? How do they set up their months? Okay, that lets them know that, what's the evidence that lets them know that they are an exerciser? You'll find there's a compilation of things that they do day in, day out that you could utilize if you haven't already done that yourself before. Okay. And here, in essence, we talked about 37 Xing in regards to results. So 37 Xing your results. So if you start looking at these small things that this identity, or people who have these identities do, these small things, and you repeatedly do it, expect through a process of time, and I'm not talking about 2 weeks, I'm not talking about 4 weeks or six weeks, I'm talking about 12 months, if not more, you'll start to experience, by getting 1% better, you'll start to experience that real massive change over a longer period of time, okay? And here, 37 times better, or 37%, or 37 times the result, okay, is actually over a 12-month period, okay? So literally ask yourself, what can you repeatedly do? What can you repeatedly do, okay? If you've never done it before, if you've never had this identity, ask someone who has, or simply make it up and just brainstorm your ideas. Then choose those small things. Choose those small things that you can do repeatedly, okay? Once again, what would X person do? Okay, if you don't know yourself, your list will make up your system. Okay, so as an example, okay, if I wanted to be a reader, it's an example that I use all the time. Instead of setting up a goal around reading a book a month, okay, which is, geez, I can't remember the last time I actually read a book a month. But if I said I wanted to be a reader, I could set up, I could ask someone, so, what do you do? And so they might say is, I have a ritual space. So one of the very first things that I might create is just a ritual space, okay, where I might consider reading. Okay, what else did you do? Well, when I first got started reading, I just focused on reading a couple of pages a night. So what ends up happening, those 1 or 2 pages ends up being potentially a book a month, but you don't start with a book a month. So what happens is, by achieving those very small things, okay, you hit those reward centers in the brain, you're more inclined to do it more often. Okay, so it's so important you do those small things repeatedly. Okay. Bear in mind that there will be an identity conflict because, as I've mentioned, we know things are good for us, okay? But when good habits conflict with your identity, this is where it's going to come down to a whole process of unlearning. If you looked at some of my other videos, life, I truly believe, is about stopping and learning not to be your old self. It's about evolving and being your new self. So it's a lot of unlearning that needs to take place. Okay, especially in regards to building that identity, okay? Bit by bit, habit by habit. The beautiful thing here is when we set these little, what we call atomic habits that are made up of that daily system, if you like, we don't delay happiness. And the more you hit those brain centers, those neurotransmitters in the brain, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, all that sort of stuff, endorphins, okay? You'll watch out in 12 months, your life will transform through that process of time, but not that short-term quick fix that so many of us, 90% of us often succumb to. Okay, so I just quickly mentioned here. So what about my goals that I've set? So really, if you've set goals as part of the compass session, if you've done the visioneering exercise, getting perspective, which is another process I use with this technique, and if you've done the wild, wacky brainstorming process, that's fine. Okay, now that you've decided your identity that you really want to focus on, okay, you've just got to think critically around the goals. Think about the timeline that you potentially put these goals out. Think about your expectations. What I'd probably suggest, okay, if this is a new identity, less is more. So probably go about deleting some of those what we call momentary points of change goals, okay. Take some of them out and think about those goals that you want to keep there, okay, that allows you still to assist, in achieving this identity of yours, and it ties in very, very nicely with those small little daily habits or atomic habits that make up your system. Make sure that your goals fit in nicely with those, okay, versus having the goals being that sole focus or that initial focus, okay. So in closing, if you want better results, forget about setting goals first, I should say, and focus on your system. But most importantly, focus on your identity first. Your identity first. Firstly, decide who you want to be, how you want to show up, what you want to be left, what do you want to be known for, what is your legacy. Okay. Find out what that person does, that backs up that identity, that creates your system. Compile a list. Create those atomic habits that make up those lists, that make up that list. Challenge your goals. Think critically about your goals that you may have already set up in your setting your compass sessions or the wild wacky goal setting process system that you might have already done with me. Put them out in your timeline, but most importantly, focus on those small little wins, bit by bit, habit by habit, because it's that continued success that will lead to sustainable subconscious change and that identity that we're all after. Okay, so if any questions, make sure you get in contact with me at dean@melbournecorporatehealth.com.au. Okay, happy to answer questions. You could respond to this post, okay, just by in the comments section there, and I'll share as many resources and links to some of these other reference materials and documents, like the compass session, like the wild wacky goal setting system, and also the visioneering piece, okay, in the session notes. Take care. Speak to you soon. Bye.